Okay, so first off, for my disclaimer, I have no clue what I'm doing. But setting up a bridge. So there are specific things that I do know. You can do a little Google searching just to make sure I've got it right, but your bridge is going to be located between in the grooves of the F holes. These are your F holes here, and you can see up close on either side there are a set of grooves, and you want your bridge to line up essentially in the middle. The grooves are offset so that your bridge lines up kind of centered between them. Your bridge positioning this way will basically be indicated by how straight and true the neck is. So you'll have to move that around a little bit once you get the actual dimensions. Once the strings are set approximately, you'll move that back and forth. Now, I haven't done reading extensively. I set up my violin how I like to play it. For the strings and the distance from string to string, I just basically did it evenly and put a little notch so that the string rests in the bridge. Your height is fairly critical because your playing will be very difficult if you mount your strings too high from the fingerboard. The E string is going to be lower and closer, so you can see you can't just take a stock bridge and throw it in there because your violin may be set up very differently. You can see this is a brand new factory bridge that hasn't been cut down at all. It would never work for my violin. I've had to do a lot of trimming down to get it. I haven't done a really amazing job just because I threw it together pretty quickly. Actually, looking more closely at it now, I did a really bad job. But anyway, one of the reasons mine is so low is at one time the neck of my violin separated, and so you can see that the fingerboard has dropped very, very close to the top of the violin. So that means that I have to cut my bridge down a lot lower to get it close to the fingerboard so that it's not too far of a push. Measurement wise, ideally it should be about 0.1 inch or 3.5 millimeters from the E string, which is your top string, to the fingerboard, and about 5 millimeters from the end of the neck for your G string, which is the low one. That will take a lot of filing and cutting and trimming till you get it just right. The bridge, how you trim it, you can use a file is the safest way, you know, using a utility knife or something to whittle away at it. I know some guys use a bench grinder, some type of grinding wheel that will take it down fairly evenly. But one of the things that you do want to have, if this is looking down from the post of our violin down to the scroll, so our G string is on the left, E string is up on the top right, you want to trim your bridge so that it's slightly higher on the G side. Some of that will be set up for a right-handed player. If the G string is positioned a little bit higher on the bridge, it's going to be a little bit more accessible when you're bowing from the right. I believe if you're a left-handed violinist, you would reverse that so that the G string on the right would actually be up a little higher. But if you play right-handed with the violin in your left hand and the bow in the right, you want basically this side to be up a little higher, and you're going to trim it down lower to the E string and try and match that 3.5 millimeters on the E string and 5 on the G. So yeah, cutting it down just takes a little bit of practice. You don't want to cut a finger off while you're doing it. Now, the other thing that's important in a professional violin setup will be done in such a way so that the intonation, the curve on the top of your violin, basically underneath where the bridge will sit, there's a curve to it. And the more you match that curve, the more you're going to get a pure, clean sound resonating through the violin. So you don't want it to be a really wacky cut For me, I also had to trim down the bottoms of the bridge, the feet on the bridge, to match the angle and curve, because the face of my violin has collapsed a little bit. So in order to get it to sit nice and flat, I had to use a file and just take a little bit off there too. But a file works really well. It's a little bit tedious and slow, but you will get it more precise. So basically, if you take a string when you're first setting it up, you put your strings on. Look at a ruler that has millimeters on it so that you can get a rough idea of how high 5 millimeters is on the one side. Just hold it up to about that place and measure from the top of your violin to where the G string is going to sit. That'll give you an idea. If you do a trace out with a pencil, once you know from the foot up to approximately where the G string will sit, you can put a little pencil mark. Do the same thing with the E string. Mark it on this side, and try and just trace out a pencil line as closely and accurately as you can, so you have a bit of a guide. Do a rough cut. You can take it down quickly to that point without being too precise, and then use a file once you get down to the very last bit, so that you get a nice clean trim. As far as vertical positioning, I've done a terrible job here. Again, you can see over time of tuning and the strings pulling, my bridge is leaning a little bit forward. You want that to be fairly straight. In a full-size violin, if it didn't have a goofed up neck, the taller that bridge sits, the more off it is in its vertical positioning, it will start to bend. And anytime you have sound traveling through a bridge or the sound post, anything like that, where it's not nice and straight, it starts to warp the wood, you're going to lose sound quality. So that's just what you want to try and accomplish there. So that's really all there is to it. Once you get your grooves, you can just take the razor blade or whatever and put a little V, a little notch that the string will sit in. You don't want that to be too deep, because it will actually muffle and affect the sound quality coming off of the string. Might be a good idea to get 2 bridges. The first time I tried cutting my first one, I did an awful job and had to do another one. So if you do screw up anything along the way, just go slow. If you go really slow and file it down, you can just keep adjusting it as you go. Start with too much. Like any carpentry rule of thumb, you can't add wood. You can measure twice, cut once. With precision stuff, like cutting about 13 times, just because the more you give yourself and kind of work at it, the less likely you'll be to cut too much and then not be able to work with it. So that's about all there is to it.